Specifically, what outstanding thing have you learned in church history so far? Learned a little bit about the devil? How was he created? By God. Was he created imperfect? All right. What caused him to be imperfect, Christina?
His will.
His will. Now, could God get glory from anything if it didn't have a will? No. It's just a robot. People, how many of you have seen these robot shows that people have? You know, they do, the college students and everything, high school students, even grade school students. They make these robots to do a certain thing. There's a robot you can buy right now that's a vacuum cleaner. Did you know that? How do you know that? You just turn the thing loose, plug it in the wall, and it vacuums your house by itself. Just goes and does its job and puts itself back up. But robots, and you can go walk in and say thank you to that machine, and thank you to that machine, and thank you. And you know what? It doesn't mean anything to the machine, does it? Because it's an inanimate machine. It will go and do all, it'll remember every corner and everything in your house, and it'll go do all this stuff. But it doesn't have a mind. It has no volition. It is programmed to do that. If mankind was programmed to do that, could God get glory? If man, as the supralapsarians say, Brother Ray, what was the first edict of the supralapsarians? What was the first edict of decree? Elect some to salvation and to damn the others. Just like Muhammad said, God, Allah, he said, created hell to be inhabited by humans and demons. To be inhabited. He created that way. God didn't create hell. He created hell for the devil and his fallen angels, and then whoever else would choose to go there. Does any man go to hell because of sin? No. You go to hell by what? You rejected Jesus Christ. Because the atonement is sufficient to save everybody. This is what we call unlimited atonement, remember? But it's only efficacious to those that believe. Now, Matthew 16:18. Can you quote that correctly for me, Brother Ray? Matthew 16:18. For you are Petros, a small stone. But upon this gigantic building block, gigantic stone, like the Rock of Gibraltar or Morro Bay Rock over there, I'll be building my church, and the gates of hell shall not wrestle her down. Now, the church was in the mind of God how long? An eternity past. But we have what we call progressive revelation. You know what progressive revelation is? Progressive revelation. It progresses. Your idea of how the person of God, as God dealt with man from eternity past, with mankind in his mind, and then in space and time, Adam was created, angels were created in eternity past, the heavens were created in eternity past, the earth was created in eternity past, the earth was destroyed, God reconstructed it, and we see this, how God's doing this. In Genesis 1 and 2, it says what? We ha'aretz, hafiatuhu wavuhu. We hoshuf el panei tamayim. We ruah Elohim meripasheth el panei hamayim. Now that's all Hebrew to you, isn't it? But it says, and the earth she had become formless and void. And then it says, and there was darkness over the faces of the deep. And then it says, we ruah Elohim. We ruah, and it said, Spirit God mourned over, suffered over the deep. And God has suffered over his creation, hasn't he? Willingly. Willingly. He has shared everything we see in this world. That's all of his plants out there. That's all of his grass. Every bird flying in the sky is his bird. Every cow on the hills, or all of 1,000, a million hills, is the Lord's, isn't it? Somebody has temporal possession of them, but it's all his. We have to remember that this is God's stuff. It's not ours. What we have is not ours. It's ours only to use for now. Now, as we go back through, we were talking last week, where did we finish over here, about the flood?
No, we finished about Genesis 6.
Yeah, Genesis 6, the flood, the reason for the flood.
Oh, yes.
Genesis 6 chapter, the reason for the flood. Let's go and look at that again. The reason for the flood. What happened? We have to go back to Genesis 3 and verse 15. What does Genesis 3 and 15 tell us, Brother Ray? What?
About unity?
Yes. It's a promise of the Savior, isn't it? And we know that mankind became really, really disappointed in Cain. Cain means what? Say Cain. Cain, that's how you say Cain, is Cain. Cain means gotten. Eve says, I have gotten a man, even Jehovah. And he turned out to be a murderer, didn't he? This is the first Antichrist. The first Antichrist. And then we see there in Genesis 3:15, we see that I will put enmity between you and her, and between your seed and her seed. Now, what did that tell us about Satan? He's going to break into the human race, isn't he? Is he going to break into the human race? And what's he going to do? He's going to procreate a child. And this child is going to be a monstrosity in thought and power. And we find out in Genesis 6 and 1, it says, Now it came about when man began to multiply on the faces of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God, and who are these sons of God? Fallen angels. These are fallen angels, yes.
I have a couple of questions on that. It's been going on.
Okay.
Sons of God, but then God says in John 3:16, my one and only begotten Son.
Yes.
So then he's saying
The sons of God in the Old Testament are referring to angels.
Where would I find that at? Because I
In Job, the first chapter. In Job chapter 1. Let's go there. Okay? Job chapter 1.
And Genesis, is it written in Hebrew or Greek?
Genesis is written in Hebrew.
In Hebrew.
Now, there is a Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of it, which is not really accurate, is it, guys? Brother Ray, is that Brother Roger? Is that Septuagint accurate? No. There is. Why is it not accurate?
Well, because it's not a translation, it's an interpretation.
It's an interpretation. They interpreted it, okay? And so they interpreted what they believed. They mistranslated it on purpose, the Septuagint is. And yet, now, I'm going to tell you a little history about that. They say that the Septuagint, there was 72 scholars went into different cells in Egypt, and they took the Hebrew Bible and they came out with the Greek translation of it, and that every one of these translations were all perfect and all agreed. That is a story. Because I can tell you, we can go from Genesis 1 and 1, and we can find all the mistakes in the Septuagint, can't we, Brother Roger? You know enough Greek and enough Hebrew to know that it's not translated correctly. It is an interpretation and not a translation. Interpretation. They believed that the earth was created formless and void. So they said the earth continued to be formless and void. It was not created that way. God doesn't create things corrupt, in a mess, in an unfinished state. All right, let's go to John, not John, but Job. And there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that he was blameless and upright and fearing God and turning away from evil. And 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him, and his possessions were 7,000 sheep and 500 oxen, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen. In other words, this guy's real rich, because this is money. This is like Rolls Royces and so on and so forth. You know, he's got all of this stuff. He's got all these cattle and everything else. He's got 500 female donkeys and very many servants, slaves. And that man was the greatest in all the land. And his sons used to go and hold a feast in the house, and each one of them on his day, on his birthday. And they would send and invite their 3 sisters to come and eat and drink with them. And it came about that when the days of feasting had completed their cycle, that Job would send and consecrate them, rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them. All for Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and have cursed God in their hearts. And thus Job did continually. Now there was a day when what? Who are these? Angels. Angels. This is the term. In the Old Testament, when you see sons of God, you see angels. The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. These are all sons of God. These are all angels. Now, you can go and look up this term, and you will see it all over. When I taught this in the book of Genesis from Hebrew, we went all over, and we chased all of them. We chased all. I mean, for 3 weeks, we chased the sons of God in the Bible. And for 3 weeks, we chased the giants, which were the progeny of the sons of God, and got every one. All of Goliath's brothers have names. And they were all killed. But they weren't easy to be killed. They're supernatural beings. They're not easy to kill. Now, when these Nephilim, an angel has to procreate with a female, and she brings forth this supernatural being. It's powerful. Because angels are they're paranormal, aren't they? Angels go between what we call dimensions. How many dimensions are there? You remember how many dimensions there are? How about it, young man? You remember how many dimensions there are? Huh? 10 dimensions. Now, how many dimensions do you play in, Brother Roger? About 3. Are angels and these Nephilim, were they limited? No. How many of you heard of Bigfoot? You ever heard me tell the Bigfoot story?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think Bigfoot or Nephilim, if you go on the internet at Google right now, and I was the one that got this idea going because I saw one, and I didn't know what it was. I had no place for it in my theology or in my mind. But I know one thing, I was terrified, absolutely terrified of it. And my mother used to say, Icamilio. That's Chickasaw. And Chickasaw, that was my great-great-great-grandfather's name. His name was No Fear. He saved an Indian boy called J. Pawnee, which was my uncle. He saved him by shooting a bear, and he had 1 bullet left, and he poured all the powder in the barrel of that gun he could get in the barrel of the gun, and threw a shot down in it, and waited for that bear to come up to him, and he stuck that bear in the barrel-like gun in that bear's mouth and pulled the trigger. And they called him Icamilio, No Fear. My mother used to say that I had no natural fear. My son, my oldest boy, was with me when I saw this thing, and I was terrified. He didn't understand why I'm terrified. He saw me kill wild hogs and do everything. Dieter Bergstrasser was with me one time over there. I killed 3 wild hogs that day with a .22 pistol. Now, nobody would think of killing wild hogs with a .22 pistol, but that's the only thing I ever killed wild hogs with was .22 pistol. Never used anything else. I killed a lot of them, but that day I killed 3. And one of those big Russian wild boars came after me. I shot him first, and he went down. I shot another 500-pound boar. He went down flat on the ground. I shot this sow, and she squealed and whirled and came at me, and I shot her again and killed her. I jumped out there with a knife, stabbed them through their throat down there into their heart, and they bled out. That's what they do. And I got the other big boar, and then the big black boar, the Russian wild boar, was after me, palping his teeth like a .22 pistol going off, and slicing it and charging me. And I had 2 shots left in that 6-shooter, and I hit him and shot him, and he fell down 2 times. Then he was still after me. I jumped over the fence, loaded that gun, jumped back in there, and here he came at me again. I shot him 1 time at a time, and I had this knife stuck in my belt. And I shoot him, he'd go down. I shoot him, he'd go down. And Brother Ray, can I shoot pretty good? All of the shots that I shot in that wild boar's head were like that, the whole pattern. Just like that, right into his brain. Every shot. And he'd go down and get up. He'd go down and get up. And Dieter was out there. He said, Jim, he said, brother, you're crazy. Get out of that thing. Let me go get a 30-06 or 308 or something. He said, that ball hog is going to get you. I said, forget it. I said, everything's okay. He said, you're nuts. You're a crazy Indian. You know, like this. And I got out there and I shot him 6 more times. I shot him 3 times. I shot him 6 more times. That's 9 times. Then I went and loaded the gun up again. And I'm in there with him charging me. And I'd just get about between you, Eli, and me, and I'd pop him. And he's charging me, and I'd pop him, and he'd hit the ground. I'd stand back, and he'd get up again. He'd charge me again, and I'd pop him and hit the ground. The leader's on the back, and he said, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy. Like this, he's going to kill you. You know, like that. And he just kept coming like that. And finally, he was laying on the ground, he was breathing, but he couldn't get up. So I jumped up, put my foot on his head like that, my body on him, and stabbed him down there like that, and he jumped up and shot me. My feet were higher than the bottom of this roof, right there. And I was hitting the ground running backwards, loading that pistol. He come out there and charging me with the blood just gushing out of him, and he hit the ground dead. Like that. My son saw all of this. They saw me catch wild raccoons. Have you ever had a raccoon? Those little rascals, something else. I've got scratches on me someplace around here, all the way down my hands where they've ripped me and torn me and bit me and everything else. I used to get a raccoon and stick my foot in his mouth. This is a live raccoon now. I'd jump on top of him. The dogs are fighting him. I'd stick my foot in his mouth, and I'd reach down and I'd grab his feet and hands and tie him together with a clothesline rope, pick him up like a satchel, and throw him in the dog box and take him home alive. Now, my boy saw all this baloney, craziness. I went out in the ocean, 20-something miles out there in a 14-foot boat, beyond the horizon. They don't know of me ever being afraid. So we come up there, and this thing's walking for over a mile. I'm watching this thing walking, and when it walks across the front and the road in front of me, my hair is standing on end. Really, have you ever had your hair stand on end and you've been so afraid? Mm-hmm. That happened to me. It's something different. I saw something different, paranormal. I saw something that I had never seen before and I didn't believe existed. I always said, because I was in the woods, I was a guide up here on Tohon Ranch, all over that place, over the Greenhorn Mountains, all of those way back, Paiute Mountain, all that back in there, some rough country. You've been up in some of that, brother. Way back in those canyons, and guess when I was there? At nighttime. Walking all over those mountains in the nighttime with following dogs, killing lions and bears and everything you can think of. So my son sees me up here, and I'm terrified of this beast. I have a .44 Magnum in the seat. I have a spotlight there because I was shooting jackrabbits and coyotes and rattlesnakes when I come across them. My boy set me, I used to get up there on, Brother Ray, you went to Glenville with me, we're cutting wood. I don't know whether you were ever with me when I killed rattlesnakes or not, but I used to get out there and I'd get a rattlesnake on the side of the road like that, and I'd kick at it like that and get it to stand up and strike, and when it strike, I'd stomp its head and kill it. If I was around where I couldn't shoot it, that's how I killed it. Now, that's pretty foolish. Don't go do that. But I did that. I did that. Now, this thing scared me to death. I was just terrified of it. Completely terrified. My son says, "What's wrong with you, Dad?" I said, this is something different. He grabbed that spotlight. I put it down. I said, "Leave it alone." He said, "You got a .44 Magnum." He says, "You can shoot pennies in the air with it. What are you worried about?" I took off. I didn't want to see it. Went on down to the road, and we got talking about it. I finally told him, I said, what I saw was a Bigfoot. I have no room for it in my mind, but now I do. As I've studied, I think that's what they are. Have you ever seen one killed? Nephilim. How long do they live? We have no history of one ever dying except being killed by David. How many sons did David have? 5 sons. How many brothers did he have? 4 brothers, and that's 5. 5 of those Nephilim. He's going to kill them all. When Joshua and Caleb went in, Caleb, Caleb? When Joshua and Caleb went into the promised land, they went up by Hebron, and that's where Abraham was buried, isn't it? They went up by Hebron, and they saw these giants, these Nephilim up there. And these people were all afraid when they saw these giants in the land. They said, boy, we're like grasshoppers in their sight. We don't want it. We don't want to go in there. And then for 40 years they all died off, didn't they? And then Joshua and Caleb got to go in, and guess what they wanted? What did Caleb say? Give me that mountain. Give me that mountain. Who was on the mountain? Nephilim. But he knew God was with him. Now, I don't know whether God was with me out there in that place. I can take on a bear and a lion and wild hogs with pistols and stuff that are not normally used to kill these things. 44 Magnums. We caught a lot of those wild hogs, and we trap them. We take them over there and sell them over there. And one of the hogs like this, they shot him 16 times with a .243 Winchester. Well, they got him down. I shot that one 15 times with a .22 pistol, and I got him down. But not one of those shots that I fired, even under pressure, jumping and running backwards, they were all like a nickel. Where he went in there, all of them like that. Now, if I can do that under pressure, what can I do without it? See. But when I saw that thing, something was not right. Let's look at this. When the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them, the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? And Satan answered, from roaming about to what? The earth, and walking around it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? For there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away. And then Satan begins to defy God and to want to hurt Job. How many of you feel like you're Job sometimes? Satan is dogging you. Well, he does. He'll dog you. The more you do for God, the more Satan's going to dog you. Isn't that right? The more consecrated your life is, and the more that you try to follow the Lord, the more Satan's going to dog you. He'll use something to dog you. Something you might not even realize. He'll dog you. Now, did that answer your question on that? Now, this goes all over. There are many references to this. If you look up the sons of God there, and you go back and you look at that all over. Now, in the New Testament, we are called sons of God. In the Old Testament, the angels are called sons of God. In the New Testament, we are called sons of God. Because now we are born again. The atonement has taken place. But still, we know who these sons of God were there. Now let's go back to the book of Genesis. And the sons of God saw that the daughters of men... Now if you go to verse number 2 there, now it doesn't say that here, but sometimes in some translations it will give you a whole list of references where you can go see this term used over and over and over again. And the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whoever they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man forever, because he is also flesh, and nevertheless his days shall be 120 years. Now, Christine, you remember what that means? 120 years. Brother Roger?
That's the time that was given to make the decision.
Okay. Okay, now we already know that Enoch had lived on the earth. And Enoch's son was called what? Methuselah. How long did Methuselah live? Come on, what you mathematicians, how long? How long did he? 969 years. Who said that? Oh, 969 years. 969 years, that's almost a millennium. Now, Enoch had preached for 300 years. He has a son during that 300 years, and he names him Methuselah, which means when he's dead it shall come to pass. And we go on all the way down to Noah, the 10th from Adam. And Noah preaches for how long? During that 120 years, that's all that man's going to be given. Now, we have 300 years, we have 969 years, kind of overlapping something. So for a whole millennium, Enoch has been saying, and Noah has been saying, that there is going to be judgment on the earth because of these Nephilim. The end's coming. How many people believe this? Huh? How many believe? How many followed Noah onto the ark? Huh? Just his family. His wife, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. That's 6. There's 8 people who got on the ark. And Enoch was raptured, which is the type of the rapture. Gone. So these are the people that made it to the flood. These are the ones that believed. And we know about Ham. Ham wasn't a very good believer, was he? He was a scoundrel. He did get on the boat. Now let me tell you a little bit of something about Islam. Since we're comparative religions, we're going to talk about comparative religions. Now, Muhammad, he couldn't read or write, they say, but he went to one of the most, the largest Christian stronghold was one of his trade centers, wasn't it? What was that, Brother Roger? Damascus, Syria. And Damascus, Syria is where the Apostle Paul got saved, wasn't it? And went down there and was baptized by the authority of that church. He went there and he was baptized by the authority of that church. That church was there and they were preaching the gospel. And when did Muhammad live? Several hundred years later. Muhammad was born in 570 A.D. All right? And when he was about 20-something years old, he went down there and went to work for this rich widow, Kahijah. And he went down and did trading. And he heard stories about the Bible. And he heard stories about the Old Testament. He heard these stories. But since he didn't write them down, he got confused a little bit. Now, he will tell you in the Quran, the Sunnahs, and the Hadiths, you know what he says about Noah and his sons? That his sons didn't listen to him. His sons didn't listen. Now, when he got on the ark, there was only one, him and his wife got on the ark, and the sons didn't listen. And one of them set out, and he kept telling his sons, come and get on the ark, the flood is coming, and all this kind of stuff. Oh, that's all right, Dad, that's all right, Dad. This is what he's saying. It's all right, Dad. I can swim. And he says out there, and he hollers out there at his son, come on board, son. And it's floating. Everything, it's raining and floating, and the boy's out there swimming. That's all right, Dad. I'm all right. I'm all right. Until he finally dies. And then after the flood, he has Ham, Shem, and Japheth. But what's the Bible say? What a mess. What a mess. Did any of Noah's sons didn't get on the ark and was floating around out there? No. And when you find all these mistakes in the Quran and everything, they'll say, well, this is not what the Bible says. Oh, the Bible's corrupted. The Bible's corrupted. What about these angels? They took wives from themselves, whomever they chose, and the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, because he is flesh, and because he shall be 120 years, and the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Mark that. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. That's these hybrids. And also, when, Brother Ray? Afterward. After what? Afterward what? What's afterward? After the flood. When the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, and this is what they call the giants. Gigantus. That's what it is in Greek, gigantus. These were the giants. Who were of old men of terror. Men of terror. Men of terror. What was one of the men in the Wild West that was one of the people that was just, they terrified if they heard his name? He killed 44 men. John Wesley Hardin. He killed men just to watch them die. He killed a lot of men. He went to, I've got a book written by him, John Wesley Hardin. By John Wesley Hardin, he tells his story. They did a movie about him. One of the famous, Rock Hudson played John Wesley Hardin in the movie. His father was a preacher. But he was a wayward soul. And he went to prison, and guess what he learned in prison? What do people, when they go to prison today, what do they do? Gangsters, Brother Ray. What do? They start studying the law, figuring out how they can get around it, don't they? They got law libraries in there. And that's one thing the police officers and things are so worried about them, because they know the law. They go there and get better at what they're doing. John Wesley Hardin killed a lot of men, and he became a lawyer. A lawyer. Finally, he was shot. Finally, he was shot as he was standing at a bar by another guy, and they said he was so dangerous they gave him off for what they call justified homicide, because he was so dangerous. So dangerous. Dangerous people. Dangerous men. Well, let's go back now to the flood. We had the flood. There was a flood on the earth. Now, a lot of people will say that the flood was what, Brother Roger?
Mythology.
It was mythology. Did you know that every group of people in the world, every group of people, the stories of their people tell you there's a flood? And these people that don't believe in the Bible, they will try to say it was localized, only right there. Now they find out that way over there in Turkey and everything, that it was all the way up into Russia. It was in Europe. They're finding signs of the flood. Now, how many of you ever been in an airplane? You look down on the earth, do you see where the flood was? Do you? Do you see where the flood was? You can see where the flood was. Now remember one thing about the flood. The flood happened on the earth when the earth was one piece of ground. That's what you call Godwana or Pangea. What does pan mean? It's a Greek word. All. Pan means all. And then gay is a Greek word which means all land. There was one piece of land and all the rest of it was water. And this is before the earth was divided. Now the geologists will tell you that the earth at one period of time, what they call the continental drift period, that the earth with the tectonic plates. Have you ever heard the word tectonic plates before? Mm-hmm. The tectonic plates shifted. That's where you have earthquakes. This is all before that. But the flood was all over that. Now, it is said that there is enough water in the poles and in the air to completely cover the earth to 20-something feet above the tallest mountains that we have on the earth today. This year, we've seen a lot of water, haven't we? Have you boys and girls been chopping weeds? You know where the weeds came from? Genesis, the 3rd chapter. Okay, Genesis, the 3rd chapter. Do you like chopping weeds? That's a cursed job, isn't it? A cursed job. A cursed job. My neighbor, when I was a young boy, when we had these wet years like this, she'd go out there and she'd pick all kinds of weeds. And she would steam them like spinach and bring them over to me and make a salad. There would be poke salad. There would be all kinds of different wild weeds, lamb's quarter, and all of this. And she'd take this and steam them up, and they were good. And not only that, if you eat this when it's cooked, you will be immune to them a little bit with hay fever. I never had the hay fever back then that I do today. Of course, when I come down here, boy, I go up to Nevada and I can breathe, and I come down here and it just feels like my lungs are full of water, and I start coughing and everything because of all of this pollen. Well, all the pollen that you have around here mainly is weeds. A lot of weeds. Weeds, the curse. So, mankind, now the flood is universal. It's not local, it's universal. It's all over the whole earth. Even though the earth was a different form then, it was all earth on one side and all water, but now the water, how many forms of water came upon them in the flood in the days of Noah? What forms were they? 3 forms. What were they? You remember what they were? How about it, Annabella? What's the 3 forms? You remember that, young lady? Peyton, do you remember what the three forms were? How about you, young lady?
It came up from the ground.
Up from the ground, the fountains of the deep.
It was coming from the sky.
The oceans in the sky were dumping down in rivers. Just think about that. Rivers were coming down from the sky. Rivers. The oceans in the sky, because the earth had a whole belt. The earth was completely encircled with the ocean above the water. What does Hashemayim mean? What? Uplifted waters. Hashemayim. Hashemayim, the uplifted waters. That's what it means. And the waters were all around the earth. A whole bubble, an ocean in the sky, and then there were floodgates. The rivers were opened up, flooding and rushing and roaring down to the earth. And then something that they had never seen before, and it was rain and thunder and lightning. In the Old Testament, where the Jews always spoke about the voice of God, what really did it mean, Brother Roger? Thunder. Thunder and lightning. When God spoke to the children of Israel from Mount Sinai, it said it what? Thundered and lightning, and the voice of God was like thunder. So now we see all of this. We see something that they'd never heard before. And when all this happened, Noah's boy wasn't out there swimming. He was not floating around. He was in the ark. All three of them. All three of them. And let me tell you another little story about this too. We're studying about church history, aren't we? Church history. What does Mormonism believe about the American Indian? You know? What's Mormonism believe about the American Indian? Brother Ray, you remember? Mormonism believes that the American Indian is a cursed race. Because a lot of our people, now I'm not very dark. I was when I was young. I can go show you a picture of me where I was dark. But I faded out. My eyes have even faded out. My eyes were just as dark. Brother Ray, you remember when my eyes, you couldn't hardly tell the browns in my eyes from the pupils. They were so dark. I'm fading away. Now they're lighter. My hair is gray. But it was black as a crow's wing back then when I was young. But the race that I was from is supposed to be a cursed race because we were Jews. We were Jews. And we transported ourselves over to America in a submarine with a hole in the top thereof and a hole in the bottom thereof. Now, when you put a hole in the top thereof and a hole in the bottom of a boat, what do you have? A sunk boat. Okay? But we have this. That's how we got here, according to them. Now, science and the Bible agree, don't they? Brother Roger, I've been teaching you this for 6 or 7 or 8 years or something like that, haven't I? Science and the Bible agree. Medicine, true medicine, science, the Bible, geology, archaeology, everything is going to agree. You know where archaeologists, how they start looking for something? They take the Bible with them. And they start looking for this city or that thing. Because that's a reference point. Whether they believe in it or not, because that's where it is. The Bible is historically accurate. Now, many times in the last part of the last century, no. See, I was born in the middle of the last century. The early part of the last century. But in the 1800s and the early 1900s, the theologians would say, the Bible is inspired of God, as it's written. But it's not historically, archaeologically, medically, or scientifically correct. It didn't mean that. It didn't mean that it was inspired that way, in that way. You ever heard that? Have you, Brother Ray? You read it? Yeah, you read it. It's there. People believe that. And even Thiessen's book on systematic theology, he refers to that the Bible is not historically or archaeologically or medically or scientifically accurate. And he quotes those theories of that. Now, the Bible is inspired of God, and it is historically accurate, it is archaeologically accurate, and it is medically and scientifically accurate. Okay? We see all of these things as you study geology. Do the scientists and geologists, do they believe in the continental drift theory? Sure they do. The Bible says that mankind, look over here, human government, he was supposed to scatter and multiply. What did mankind do? Stayed up on that. And there's where we have diseases. Diseases mutate, don't they? How many of you have heard about these flesh-eating viruses and bacteria? And we didn't have this before. Where'd it come from? Because these diseases mutate. And what are disease and bacteria and viruses, Brother Roger? Fallen life forms. Bacteria? Bacteria is a life form. It's a life form. But it is a fallen life form. And when fallen life form comes in contact with you, it will affect you. How many of you ever had a cold? That's what you call a rhinovirus. Rhinovirus. Why do they call it a rhinovirus? That's a Greek word. Huh? Because the first thing that starts happening, you start sneezing, your nose starts running. How many of you just learned something there? Okay, that's a rhinovirus. Now with the rhinovirus, you do not have a fever. It affects your upper respiratory system. And this is a fallen life form. A virus is a fallen life form. And this fallen life form virus affects you, and it starts affecting your hearing, and it affects your nose, and then you begin to cough. Now, there is no cure for the common cold. That's what it is, the rhinovirus. You have to go through the stages of it. Through the stages of it. And you go through these different stages of this cold. And finally it goes down in your lungs and you start coughing, cough, 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 cough. Now it can mutate into a bacterial form of bronchitis, where you cough and then you get an infection in your bronchial tube, and that gets on. And then they can give you antibiotics to kill that. Some forms of pneumonia you can have antibiotics for. Some forms of the influenza or the flu, you can get shots and stuff. If you're fast enough, you can get these shots and things that will kill that. But the common cold, they have no cure for it. You have to go through the stages of it, and these are fallen life forms. And God did not want us to be in cities. He said, scatter and multiply. And that failure, they dwelt in Egypt. Or not dwelt in Egypt, but they didn't scatter. And what was the big city that they built? Babylon, Nimrod. And I told you last week, the Madonna and the mother and the child, the Madonna and child, and the little child would have a halo on his head, wouldn't it? Sometimes even the mother would have a halo. And this is what we have Catholicism. We see that in the mother and child, Mary. And the Catholic Church, did they worship Jesus? Did they worship the Father? Who do they worship? Who do they pray to? Mary. Because she's the mother of God. Now do you see how that's evolved from this, what we call idolatry and everything? Yes.
Where in the Bible does it say the Madonna and child was at Babylon?
This is history. This is history. Get Alexander Hislop's Two Babylons, and just go to Google. Google it. Go to Google and Google the Madonna and child in ancient history, and you'll see Nimrod and his mother. Okay, you'll see this back. You can go now. You Google everything. You can find anything on the internet. Now we go on, and they failed. They didn't scatter, so God confused the language. They built the tower. It was all the way built. It was a place of worship, and they built this tower. And they were worshiping Nimrod. And here we have mass slavery, don't we? Mass slavery. What happened in Egypt? Mass slavery. What happened in Central and Mesoamerica with the pyramids and the mummies? The oldest mummies in the world are found where? America. Meso and South America are the oldest mummies in the world. Mathematics, advanced medicine, surgery and everything else. Pharmakia, that's Greek for pharmacy. You get a word pharmacy. Drugs and drug use. You know that 70% of all at least 70% of all drugs that are sold at the drugstore came from American Indian medicines. Herbs. A lot of people won't take drugs from the drugstore, will they, Brother Ray? They'll go to the original source. God, these people believe that God showed them what herbs to use to counteract. Remember the tree of life? If they had eaten from the tree of life, there's only one tree of life, but there are many trees and herbs that can give you medicine. Medicine. How many of you like cilantro?
Mm-hmm.
You like cilantro?
Yes.
All right. Do you know what cilantro seeds look like? Look like manna. It comes from the Hebrew word mah. Manna means what is it? And it said that the manna looked like coriander seeds, which is the same thing as cilantro. Coriander is cilantro. Cilantro is one of the greatest medicines you can eat naturally to cleanse your body of heavy metals. Did you know that? It cleanses your bodies of heavy metal. If you get exposed to mercury and arsenic and things like that, too much of all these things, you take this. Now, I'm going to tell you something about mercury. Cilantro. I am so poisoned with arsenic and mercury that I have to be careful how much cilantro that I eat. They told me in the beginning, they tried to give me chelation therapy to get this stuff out of my body and almost killed me. They say eat one leaf of a cilantro plant every day until you can double and triple it. Now, I like to go to Carl's Jr., and I go there and I get their pico de gallo sauce. And I'll put a little ketchup in that, and I'll eat that like it's food. The cilantro. But if I eat too much of it, I start getting leg cramps, for the mercury's coming out of my legs and all of that. And the arsenic is getting rid of it. And my heart will start rattling. My kidneys will hurt because it's throwing all this heavy metal into my bloodstream to get rid of it. So we see all of this stuff. Did you learn something there today? Study herbs and medicine. There are a lot of that God put it here for us to use. Now, the judgment was the confusion of the languages. There are a lot of languages in the world. There are a lot of languages among American Indians. One of the oldest and the most advanced civilizations in the world and the most populated continents in the world were the American continents. Now, the Smithsonian Institute subdued that for years. Because when the Anglo-Saxons came to America, they had to have some excuse to murder all these Indians. There were 150 million Indians on these continents when the white man came here. Within the first 100 to 200 years, almost 100 million had died. Now, when you go to war, you're going to make your enemy less than a human, don't you? To kill him. And so they tried to make these people less than human. The Mormon culture is that the American Indian is a bad person because they believe in what we call reincarnation. If you're born dark or black into this world, you did something really bad in your former life. Okay? Now, we find out that all of these people died over here. All of the sons of Cain died over here, and the curse on Cain, according to Joseph Smith, was he was black. God made him black. Now, according to the Hebrew, it was an oath that God protected him with. God protected him from being killed with an oath that he put on him, like his name or something. I don't know what he did. I don't know what that curse was or that mark was. It wasn't so much a curse, it was a mark. It was a protection mark. Now, you see all of this. And they said, well, how in the world did Cain's descendants get over here on this side of the flood? And old Joseph Smith came up with an argument. He said, well, Ham was married to one of Cain's descendants. Now, that's not true, is it? Because we know that all of their descendants, all of their genealogy, all their DNA was pure, and they weren't related to any Nephilim either. But he had to have some excuse for this. Do you know who Muhammad thought Mary was? The mother of Jesus? You know who Muhammad thought Mary was? Brother Ray, you remember me saying this?
Got it in my head, but I can't get it out. I remember about that.
Moses' sister.
Mary.
Muhammad thought Mary, or Miriam, was Moses' sister. Now, that's a long way off. Here, this is just a little bit out of context in it. Here we have over here the Egyptian bondage. We have Miriam over here. And I mean, she's a virgin over here. Miriam over here is Moses' sister. Now, the Bible says she died. And she was cursed with leprosy too, wasn't she?
Yes.
We're out of context. You know why I have this little thing up here? So you can understand what part of history we're talking about. Now, the flood was in the days of Noah. And then we have human government, and then we have the division of the earth. In the days of Peleg, God divided the earth, and all the languages are all, that's how we got. All the languages in the world today was that curse. God confused the languages. Now let's go on over here. Now we come to a different period of time. We have a guy by the name of Abram. We got up to Abram, Brother Ray. Abram. Abram. His name wasn't Abraham yet. And we had Sarai, and her name wasn't Sarah yet. And they added the fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet to both of those names, and it was a hey. It's like this. It's got a post right there and kind of a thing like that, a hey. To their name, the fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and number 5 in the Bible is what number, Brother Ray? The number of grace. We're saved by grace. Was Abraham saved by grace? Yeah. Was Noah saved by grace? Yes. Was Isaac saved by grace? It had to be because he was a scoundrel. Like me, We're all saved by grace. So God calls Abraham. And where's Abraham now? Where's Abraham? Down there real near the Tower of Babel. And real near all of those big cities. And God said, what? Scatter and multiply before. Is that thing still good for us today? Scatter and multiply. At one time, people in Alaska didn't get colds and didn't get the flu at all. They're all scattered all over out there. In Idaho, Montana, and all that. Now we have all this world traveling in airplanes and all that. Scattered all these diseases, mutated life forms. Fallen life forms, and that's why we have all this disease. And we've become world travelers, haven't we? And we got all kinds of diseases. In America, there was no tuberculosis here. Did you know that? For years, they had wiped out tuberculosis. They had wiped out many of the diseases, yellow fever and smallpox, all of this. I have a smallpox vaccination on my left arm when I was a little bitty boy. They took me up there when I was probably a year old, and I remember them doing this. They took me up to the Kern General Hospital. It was a red brick building at that time, and they went through there, and they scratched me and did all this stuff to my arm. And you know what? I didn't hardly have a... How many of you have had smallpox shots? Any of you? Brother Ray, you have one? Huh?
Is that the one that they give?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a big scar. Now, you know what? I don't have a scar on my arm. Now, I'm almost all American Indian. Smallpox killed the Indians. But if you trace my lineage back to Sam Paul, he had smallpox and he recovered from it. He became immune to it. And that immunity was passed on down to he was my great-great-grandfather. It was passed down to me. Now, I'm only 1/32 white. But that immunity was passed down to me. And I remember one time when my shoulder was dislocated when a horse fell on me and tore me all up, that the doctor was looking at me, my doctor, and he said, boy, he said, you didn't have much of a reaction to that smallpox. He said, somebody in your family must have had smallpox and recovered. Sam Paul. Sam Paul. We see this. Like I told you, my neighbor used to pick all these weeds and make salad out of them for me and give them to me, and I didn't have colds and stuff. And what do the allergy doctors do to you today? They take a little bit of stuff and they inject it in your system. So you will become immune to it. Immune to it. Let's go on a little bit further. Are we learning about medicine and science and everything as we go along here, along with church history? Now remember, the church was always in the mind of the God all the way through here. Now we have Abraham. And God tells Abraham, get out of here. Get out from among these headhunters and heathens, so to speak. Get away from them. And go over there in the land of Canaan. Now we know that already that God was going to curse the people in the land of Canaan, didn't he? In Genesis, the 9th chapter, he tells Noah makes this prophecy by inspiration. And he said that Japheth will dwell in the tents of Shem, that some way, sometime, that the Shemites, the Gentiles, the dogs, are going to take over the gospel. And it also says there that the descendants of Canaan will be cursed. All the descendants of Canaan will be cursed. Now, not every one of them were cursed, were they? You know, when we talk about history, we talk about wars, don't we? We talk about wars. And what caused most wars, Brother Ray? What caused most wars in history? Religion. Whether it was the emperor worship, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians. What did Nebuchadnezzar tell these people to do? Build this big idol to me, and when I blow the whistle, you better come down and worship me. And when they went to war, they fought in the name of their god, which was Nebuchadnezzar. Egyptians, they looked upon the Pharaoh as God, didn't they? And so one god would be fighting against other gods. And then in the history of the world, as we look back in the history of the world, we find that the church and the state became one in 325 A.D., and once the church and the state, then it began to persecute all other beliefs. We get up to 570 A.D., when Muhammad is born. He tried to be a prophet of God, of Allah, and it didn't work. But when he started carrying the sword and cutting people's throats if they didn't believe in what he believed, it worked. Because he'd already seen it work in Catholicism. Now we're jumped way ahead. We're going to go back, but always in church history, we find wars and violence in church history. But the truth never persecutes the other people. We have one exception to that, don't we? What exception to that do we have? Abraham, he's called out of the Ur of the Chaldees. He went up to Haran, where his father finally died. He couldn't get away from that old man, because the old man was a pagan. So God finally took his life. He took his brother's life, and he went on down in the land of Canaan, where he was going to be his land, because these people were going to be cursed, but their sins had not filled up yet. And so we have Abraham, and then he has a boy named Laughter, or Yitzchak. Yitzchak. Yitzchak means pleasure or laughter. Do you like to laugh? If you ever get to feeling real bad and real depressed, put on a funny movie. Put on Laurel and Hardy. Okay? And you'll start laughing. And you'll start laughing and you'll forget your sadness. Start laughing and forget your sadness. Laughter. Laughter is a pleasure. The word laughter, or the word yitzhak, means to kiss, to make love, and to laugh. That's what it means. It means all those things. It means these functions of pleasure, laughter. Well, he had Yitzchak, and he laughed when God said that his wife was going to have a kid, because he had this young girl, Hagar, who made him wanderer, and she was the princess of Egypt. Did you know that, Hagar? Hagar was Pharaoh's daughter. How many of you knew that? Hagar was Pharaoh's daughter. He gave his daughter to Abraham to be his wife, a princess in Abraham's life. And what did Abraham do? He lied to Pharaoh. He told him that Sarah was his sister, and he gave him Hagar as his wife, his daughter. Abraham gives his sister to Pharaoh. Pharaoh gives his daughter as a political marriage, as allies, because now they won't fight, because their families will be related to each other, so they won't be fighting. And he turns around and gives Hagar, which is the princess of Egypt, to his wife as a handmaid slave. And then we see, out of her, we see Ishmael. Ishmael. And who is Ishmael? One of the fathers of the Arab races. One of the fathers of the Arab races. And he had how many sons? 12 sons of 12 tribes. Like Jacob would have 12 sons. We see all of these great nations being formed by this. And we're going to study these nations and find out how religion causes them to fight and to kill and to make war. Do you have any questions so far? We got there. We got to Abraham, we got to Isaac, and we got to Jacob, and we're going to look a little bit about Jacob's life. Do you have any questions? Did you learn something today? I want you to learn the Bible, but I want you to learn how the Bible is absolutely inspired of God, that is inspired historically, medically, physical science, all of this. It is the Bible. When you go into church, don't leave your brain outside the church and come in and start letting them fill you with all this baloney and modern theories of biblical belief. It's a great belief that you believe, don't you? Believe. Belief is a leap of faith. And I'm not telling you to lay your face down, but I'm telling you to look at that Bible as a valuable historical, archaeological, medical, scientific book. And that will build your faith in the book and in God. And you won't be a dumber than a box of rocks either. All right. Do you have any questions? Carrie, have questions? Christina? I hope I answered your question.
Well, I'm still on that. My head is still there.
Okay.
So, you said the Old Testament was written in Hebrew?
Yes. Most of the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. Part of it was written in Chaldee or Aramaic. And that's when they were off in the Babylonian captivity. The New Testament is written in Greek, which is the most perfect language that's ever been created by mankind. Flawless grammatically. So you can't twist it up. The Bible is inspired in Hebrew and in Greek. Okay? Now, I can tell you the different books in the Bible that are written in Chaldee. They're doing the books that were written during the Babylonian captivity. Okay? Those are the ones that are written in Chaldee. And Chaldee or Babylonian or Persian, ancient Persian. That's what all of this is. Iraq is Persian. They call themselves Persians. They don't call themselves Iraqis, really. They're Persian.
So the name
Nephilim.
Nephilim
Mm-hmm. That means fallen ones.
means fallen ones.
Yes.
Okay.
Fallen ones. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and after. In the days before the flood and after the flood. After the flood, we have at least the names of 6 of them. After the flood. And remember, these people live a long time. These things live a long time.
So how about their children? So the children died during the flood? Or
All of the Nephilim died during the flood, but then the angels cohabited with women after the flood and brought forth these giants again. Because God had promised that he would bring forth a child of a woman, the seed of the woman, but that Satan would bring forth a child, specifically the Antichrist. I tell you what, if you ask a Muslim that's been converted, he'll say that Muhammad was one of the Antichrist, that he was a son of Satan. The converted ones.
so where in the Bible does it tell us that the fallen angels can procreate?
Genesis 6th chapter. Right there. Genesis the 6th
Just
chapter.
that part.
Yeah. Now in the New Testament, people quote and they say, Jesus says in the New Testament that in the resurrection, when he talked about the Sadducees came to him and they said, this guy has this guy married this woman. He died. There were 5 brothers. All of them died, and they all took her as wife. Whose wife will she be in the resurrection? And he said, there is no marriage and given the marriage in the resurrection as the angels in where? In heaven. We're not talking about the fallen ones. And so they say, see, angels can't marry. It didn't say that the angels in heaven don't procreate. It didn't say anything about the others. In Genesis 6th chapter, we have them. We have Goliath. We have Og. We have all of his brothers, which I can bring you their names. Next week we'll do this. We'll study more about this. How about that?
Okay.
We'll study about the giants next week. I'll bring and give you a lesson on. Is that you want to hear about this? Okay. Now I just briefly covered it this week, but we'll look at it thoroughly next week. All right? Got all the scriptures. We'll go look at them. It's going to take us 2 weeks to do that, because I can't do it in 1 week. But if we look at all this and you get firmly founded in this, you will be okay with it, won't you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because you've learned it. You see it all over. It's going to just flabbergast you how many Nephilim there were in the Bible. There's a gob of them. And all of them were bad dudes. There aren't any good dudes. Now, let me tell you something. There were Nephilim on this continent, too. Here. And a lot of them in South America, they were big. Now, the modern unbelievers believe that they were angels. When the Bible talked about angels, it's talking about spacemen coming down and cohabiting with the women. Because everybody that has been captured by a UFO has been sexually molested in some way. Okay? Now, if there's UFOs out there, I'm not saying they're not. If they are UFOs out there, these are demonic. And the UFOs go between dimensions. How do you think they can fly so fast and everything? Chuck Missler did a whole thing on the UFOs one time where he talked about them and how all these people had been captured and taken to these UFOs. He said these are demonic materializations. These are demons and angels and fallen angels that are cohabited with women. Okay? Now, that's all I can tell you about that. Yeah, I could maybe make a copy of that and you could watch the whole movie. It's about an hour long. And people are standing there on the edge of their seats listening to him about the different scriptures. But I will go in deeper in the scriptures and in Hebrew than he did. All right? Is that your next week? Next time? I don't know when it'll be, whether I'll be here next week or not. Who knows? We'll see what happens. I'll stay in touch with you. All right? Tomorrow at 2:30 I'm teaching creation versus evolution. That's pretty exciting too if you have time to do that. Any other questions before you go? Peyton, did you learn something today?
I did.
Emma? All right. All of you learned something today? The doors, I hope to open. You were in a great big building. I used to have this nightmare that I dreamed for years and years and years, and finally it was fulfilled when I moved to this farm. This was a nightmare. I dreamed about going into this place, and there was all kinds of stuff that I had to clean out and to get to, and I had more doors and doors and doors. I'd go in there and clean this room out, and then I'd find another door and another door and another door. Boy, for the first 15 years I lived here, I was doing that. But Bible, you have the Bible in English, and you look at it, and you think you know it. Brett came to my classes about 15 years ago, and he was going to teach me the Bible because he could listen to Roger and Phil, and he could tell you the next word they were going to say out of their mouth. And he had read the Bible at that time 17 times, and he knew the Bible really well. And any subject they started preaching on, he could tell you the next verses they were going to go to. And then he came into my classes. He said, like this. And he came up first, and he started telling me all he knew about the Bible. And okay, I just listened to him a little bit. After about 6 weeks, 6 months, he said, I am depressed. I don't know anything about the Bible. I have seen more here than I knew that ever existed in the Bible. He said, I'm flabbergasted. He said, I don't know anything. I thought I knew the Bible. Now you opened up more doors and more doors. You think you get in this room, well, you get an idea about this systematic theology, election, all of that. Brother Ray, election. It was a dark room, wasn't it, when you walked into it 6 months ago? Now you've got where you can see the light on it, can't you? You can see the reason for this. You can see the different theories of it. So there's another door over there, and you open that door up, and you walk into that dark room, and pretty soon the light turns on. And then you walk into another door, and another door, and another door. And that's the way the Bible is, because this is the eternal book. This Bible is full of gold. It is a treasure chest of knowledge. It's not only knowledge, but the whole soteriology of the human race is there, and the whole universe, angels, spirits, and all of this. You hear the whole story about all of them and how it all fits together like a carpet. like a tapestry. All right. You ready to go? Go out and do something eternal. All right? Carrie, would you dismiss us in prayer, please?